Hello and welcome to Decision NYC with Ben Max. I'm Ben Max, your host and the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. The 2021 New York City election season is well underway, and it's poised to be the most significant municipal election in decades. All of city government is on the ballot, and because so few incumbents are eligible to run for their current seats due to term limits, New Yorkers are electing many new office holders and the next roster of leadership for our city. There will be a new mayor of New York City elected here in 2021, as well as a new city controller, several new borough presidents, and many new city council members. And that's not all that's on the ballot. A number of incumbents are eligible for and seeking re-election, including the city's public advocate. And there's a very crowded and competitive race for Manhattan District Attorney. Party primaries are set for June, and the general election in the fall will culminate on November 2nd. This is the first full set of municipal elections that will feature both early voting as well as ranked choice voting, a system that applies only to party primary and special elections, and we'll explain it in another show entirely. The city election cycle would be of enormous importance under more usual circumstances, but it's unfolding at a time of great crisis for our city, raising the stakes of the decisions that you, the voter, will make. The new wave of city leadership will, quite clearly, make or break the city's recovery from the devastation of COVID-19 and its impacts on health, families, jobs, education, housing, and much more. It's also important to note, of course, that the city faced a number of immense crises even before the pandemic, and those have not gone away. It's an important time of choosing here in New York City, so we're pleased to bring you this new series of interviews with candidates running for citywide offices, mayor, public advocate, controller, as well as interviews with candidates for other offices, and there will be debates. These one-on-one conversations will help you get to know the candidates better, learn about their backgrounds, their platforms, where they stand on key issues, and what their vision is for the future of the city. We hope this and other interviews will help you sort through your many choices and make informed decisions when it's time to vote. Today, we're focused on the position of New York City Public Advocate. The public advocate is a citywide elected position and first in line to become mayor if there's a vacancy in that office. The public advocate is meant to be just that, an advocate for New Yorkers, a watchdog over city government, especially the mayoral administration and other entities that impact the city and its residents. It's supposed to be an ombudsperson who New Yorkers can go to with problems and complaints, and an official tasked with proposing solutions to make government work better for the people. The public advocate is a non-voting member of the New York City Council with the right to introduce and co-sponsor legislation. And the public advocate appoints members to several boards and commissions, including one member of the New York City Planning Commission. And there are a few other responsibilities and powers as well. So today's interview, joining me now by Zoom, is Tio Chino, a Democratic candidate for public advocate of New York City. Tio, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Hi, Ben. My name is Theo Chino. I'm a computer engineer. I used to work for Spectrum, Time Warner Cable, and I got laid off when the Spectrum Charter Time Warner Cable merger took place. I worked there for 15 years. I transitioned all the backend from analog technology to digital technology, and I installed the internet, the backend of the internet. Back in 2000. I came from, my training was done in the Silicon Valley during the dot-com boom. And before that, I went to the University of Alaska. I left New York in '92 when it was dangerous, and I decided to go somewhere else. Otherwise, I would have ended up, I don't know where I would have ended up otherwise. I'm running for public advocate. Because I see that there is many problems that has taken place that are happening in New York, and I guess we'll talk about that in a.
We will. So in recent years, what have you been doing professionally or in your free time to contribute to the city?
So I am very fortunate. I am married to a wonderful doctor, and so I have taken, after I got laid off from Spectrum, because they moved my position to Denver, and I had no choice. It's either take the position in Denver or be laid off. I prefer to be laid off. And basically, I've been working on a computer project called Rep My Block, which is to get as many people from New York involved in politics on the grassroots level.
And what's the purpose of that?
is to get as many activists who don't understand how the Democratic or the Republican Party works and get them involved in the grassroots of the Democratic or Republican Party in New York State.
Mhm.
So basically, it's a website where you go put your name down and get a petition, and you explain everything on how to get on the ballot.
And how's that project going?
Pretty well, actually, if you look at the result. I mean, Paperboy Love Prince ran and tested the product during his congressional run. He made it on the ballot. Not everything was perfect, but as an engineer, I look at it as an engineer, and it was a success.
Okay. So what skills do you have? What talents do you have that you think especially lend to becoming the public advocate of New York City? What sets you apart? What do you think would be your biggest sort of skills and characteristics that would make you a good public advocate?
Well, when I ran the first time for public advocate during the special election, I was like every New Yorker. I thought the public advocate position was a useless position, like Councilman Yeager said. And I read the Charter of New York. And one of those obscure positions that the public advocate has is to be the chair of the Communication on Public Information and Communication. Basically, I would say it's a very interesting position that has not been used in New York. It has been created in '89, and when the Board of Estimate disappeared, that position was given to the public advocate. And that skill, as a computer engineer, someone who deals with data information, is something that is very important for to fulfill the role of chair of the Commission on Public Information and Communication. The reason I got involved in politics in the first place was when our district attorney, Cyrus Vance, introduced legislation to get into the cell phone of people. I don't know if you remember that episode between the FBI and Apple. Cyrus Vance was pushing out legislation to get into people's cell phone and break encryption. And so I went to see Cyrus Vance and I say, well, can we have a meeting to discuss the technology behind encryption, the mathematics behind encryption? And it was categorically no. He knew better over the computer engineer. And so that's how I basically became a data and privacy activist.
And so your position on that was that they should not be able to break into cell phones.
It's not that they shouldn't, is mathematically impossible. Computer, it's either 1 or 0. So it's either, there is no gray area. It's either you break it or you don't. So the problem is the goal is lofty. I mean, yes, you should be able, law enforcement should be able to have access to a cell phone. But the problem is if law enforcement has access, so do criminal. This is not, it's not, there is a gray area where you can.
It's a slippery slope. Yeah.
Exactly. It's more than that. There is no slippery slope. It's either you have it or you don't. There is no middle ground in here because science says it.
So you mentioned the Commission on Public Information and Communication, which is something that basically public advocates have really not invigorated. Different public advocates have said they were going to and haven't. The whole idea behind this commission is to help New Yorkers access city government information and city information using communication and technology to improve access to information, distribution of city data and information. Mm-hmm. What would you do as public advocate to invigorate that commission and make it work for New Yorkers?
Well, maybe the first step would be having monthly meeting. The second step would be to start doing an overview of all where the public data is. I mean, between Link NYC that is collecting thousands and thousands of gigabytes of data in between the picture, the everything that goes into those kiosks, we need to figure out what we're going to do with that data. It belongs to New Yorker. It doesn't belong to Google. So we need to have a way and a plan to deal with that data. and to deal with that information. What should we give back to the city, to the resident of New York to conduct their to conduct their life? How can we give that data to small business to have better understanding of traffic flow in their neighborhood? I mean, there is a ton of things we could do with that office and with that commission to make it better for New Yorker to deal with data, because data is just data. We need to have information out of that data. And that's what that commission should be there, how to transform the city data into city information that New Yorker can use without having to pay for it.
So you are running there. Most of the seats in city government are actually open, quote unquote, open this year because of term limits, but you're running for a seat that is occupied, has an incumbent, and you're running in the primary against public advocate Jumaane Williams. What has he not done, or what has he done that you disagree with, that you think he needs to be replaced?
For me, is on multiple levels. I've been talking about that Commission of Public Information and Communication since I discovered 2 years ago. Jumaane has not taken the phone and called me and say, hey, you're a computer engineer, join my team. So I want Jumaane, basically, I will be doing the reverse. If I were to be elected public advocate, I will hire Jumaane back at his current salary, because I want all the people who have experience to do certain things. Jumaane is a better speaker than I am. Why not have him in as a co-public advocate? That's what I have against Jumaane, is he hasn't been inclusive enough with the people that run against him. It's always a competition that is not inclusive. Is you against me, therefore I will not work with you. And that has happened for the last 2 years. And my campaign basically is the continuation of what happened in November of 2 years ago.
Right, the special election. It's not necessarily, expected or required of office holders to bring in to their cabinet, to their office, the people that they ran against. But you're saying you would have liked at least to have a conversation, him to tap into your expertise, is what you're saying, or you wanted a position in the public advocate's office?
No, I did not want a position in the public advocate. I would like Jumaane, I would have loved Jumaane to be inclusive, to say, you have experience. And on top of that, I am running, there is multiple issue between Jumaane and I. I live in New York. I'm a third generation New Yorker in my building. At the place where I live, it's a building that has been built pre-war, 1914, rent controlled, well stabilized, all that. And my landlord basically is a corrupt nonprofit, nonprofit from Wall Street. And I have been dealing with this corruption issue for the last 20 years. My mother before that had been dealing with the housing corruption for more than 20 other years. And how can I explain that very succinctly? Jumaane has not done anything for the housing corruption or fighting against corruption. And when he nominated Sia Weaver for the New York City Planning Commission, basically he nominated someone that worked and got trained by my landlord to get tenants quiet when they were calling out the corruption.
The details of that I'm not quite familiar with, but to be a housing advocate, that a lot of folks say she's one of the leading tenant advocates in the state. So I'm unclear on that. We'll have to maybe look into that closer. I don't want to take too much time on that.
But this is an example of Jumaane. Tenant all over New York City. If you remember the case in Brooklyn of building taking out from brown and black people. Do you remember they were talking about that? There was a big article about
the deed transfers.
Well, they were using the Blight Neighborhood Law, Title 11, to basically do the deed transfer from black owner into the HPD program,
Right.
into the third-party transfer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The sponsor of that program was the person who trained Sia Weaver. And her job was to go into those buildings and tell the tenant everything will be all right. We had a Sia Weaver walk into my building 20 years ago, tell us the construction will take 2 years. It has taken 20 years right now. The construction is not complete. This is why when we went to see the public advocate, T. Jane before, and now Jumani, when he nominated Sia Weaver, for us, that was a slap in the face. That's the second reason I'm upset with.
I just want to say that there's a lot of things, that you said there, that there's plenty of stuff related to city government and politics. I'm sort of able to fact check and discuss on the spot. Some of these things that you're mentioning are not things I'm familiar with. Some of it sounds pretty complicated and things we might have to look into a little bit later. There was a lot of controversy over that deed transfer program and real questions about how it's being run, but I'm not totally sure about the connection there with Public Advocate Williams and his nomination to the City Planning Commission. But since we don't have unlimited time, let's move on a little bit. You, as Public Advocate, would be charged with oversight of the mayoral administration, among other entities. Basically, right. Your oversight capacity is very wide. It's anything that impacts New Yorkers, really, as Public Advocate. But in terms of oversight of the mayoral administration, how would you approach that? Are there things that you would do with the Public Advocate's office that are not being done now? Are there certain city programs or agencies that you look more closely at? Are there ways that you would structure the office to do better oversight? How would you fulfill that capacity of the office, the oversight role?
Well, I would start by introducing a lot of legislation to get transparency out of those administration. I mean, when you look at we can start with HPD since we were talking about housing. HPD has been fraught with corruption from inside out. I mean, there is 135,000 empty units managed by HPD. 135,000 empty units. In my building alone, there was 60 units that are empty and has sat empty for 20 years. You go on 150, 5 blocks from my house, half of a building is empty because HPD lose track of what units are empty. So what happened is that you have employees that start to take those empty units for themselves. And that has been corroborated. People have gone to jail, you name it. So here it is, an example of oversight that the public advocate should be on top of it. Make the community participate in the oversight of their government. HPD, tenants of HPD have been calling out this corruption for more than 30 years, but they have no way. Every time they approach their city government, they're told that it's not possible. It's outlandish. They are not trusted. So we need to have a way for the community to be trusted by their government when they tell them something is wrong. And this is what I want to do as public advocate. Talk about the police. For example, the public advocate, I would call out for the resignation of the PBA president. Pat Lynch needs to resign. He doesn't represent the rank and file of the NYPD anymore. We need to have a board of the PBA that resemble the rank and file of the police, that resemble the police rank and file. So
you don't think if the police rank and file were unhappy with Pat Lynch's leadership of the PBA that they would do something about it?
I asked them. I go out and I ask them, why do you keep voting for Pat Lynch? And they go, hey, that's how it's set up. There is no other option. So for example, as public advocate, I would help the NYPD to have fair election, having anyone who wants to run for PBA president and for PBA board to have a voice that where they don't feel that they have to do something they don't really want to do.
That's interesting about the Maine Patrol Officers Union. What about policing and the city police force, how policing is done in the city? Are there things as public advocate that you'd be pushing in terms of police reform itself into how policing is done in the city?
Well, I mean, we need to listen to the community, and we also need to look at our racist history in the United States. Until we don't look at our racist history, we will never be able to change the bias that certain officers have on the population they're supposed to protect. So we need to work on that. And basically, it will take time. It's not an overnight thing, but we cannot have the chief of the PBA call out every black and brown person a criminal. I mean, that's not possible. And that's one of the reasons I left to Alaska, because I felt that something would happen to me. I mean, the story about Alvin Bragg being at gunpoint, that happened to me. I was parking my uncle's car outside my apartment here at 640 Riverside. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and 6 people came with gun, pointed at me just because it seems like I look like a criminal they had. That was what New Yorkers who are brown and black go through.
So that was police officers that
yeah, they were police officers. I mean, I wrote a paper in school called Welcome Back New York, which is a fiction, but based on that reality. That was my English paper. And when I look back 30 years later, I'm like, wow, this is really poignant. But so the thing is, the police, the reform needs to happen from inside. We cannot we need to change everything. The brass need to change. Everything needs to change. We need to get something from the rank and file. We need to change the training. We need to change a lot of things. But let's start with the PBA.
What do you think about this proposal to have the mayor's nomination for police commissioner need to be approved by the city council? What do you think about that proposal?
I love it.
You like it? Okay.
I like it.
And when it comes to the police budget, this has obviously been a big point of contention, and likely will be again as we get into city budget season again here in 2021, leading up to the usually in June budget deal ahead of the July 1st start of the new fiscal year. What do you think about the defund the NYPD movement? Do you think there's a certain amount that should be removed from the police budget and put into other resources and investments? The NYPD annual operating budget is typically around $6 billion. What do you think?
Oh, we can slash that budget. I mean, policing is not a question about having more money, more toys. I mean, we need, as a public advocate, for example, we need to slash and defund the police. Let's make no mistake about it. Too much money is used in useless things by the NYPD. And they could use, I mean, police is not about having a gun on the waist and branding it left and right and walking strong. Mm-hmm. Police is about working with the community. So yes, we need to divest, defund, remove from the budget and use it for something else that will be growing the community. And one of the things is, for example, the Post Act. The Post Act finally passed last year. We just had the result. The police just listed, according to the Post Act, all the technology, all the use of the technology that they have. And we already can see that they're lying on the use of the technology, because as a technologist, I can recognize that there is a lot of hole in what they're publishing.
Let me try to get you on a couple other subjects while we have our last 5 minutes here, or just under 5 minutes. A couple other big issues always facing the city are education and housing. Are there any principles on either of those two big issues that you would bring to the public advocate's office? Anything that you're talking about in this campaign that you want to see different when it comes to how city schools are run, or how the city approaches housing affordability, housing development? Anything you want to mention on either of those two fronts that the public advocate's office often has at least a bully pulpit on, can put out policy papers on, and of course has oversight?
Well, on the housing issue, I am myself a housing victim, so there is a lot to be done. I mean, the third-party transfer system, having building HPD give for $1 building to nonprofit landlord who don't pay taxes versus for-profit landlord that pay taxes, well, when they can, is a problem to me. The city stock either is run by the city, but the private public partnership that Sean Donovan proposed when he was commissioner of HPD is a failure. And that's why there is all this corruption in the city housing stock. So we need to get rid of the 421 tax abatement. We need the J51. All those things are ripe for corruption. So we need, as public advocate, I would look and do a systematic inventory of the stock, of where it's going, and what we need to fix.
Do you think New York City needs to build a lot more new housing? And if so, are you someone who believes in letting sort of the free market run, and that will then create enough housing to sort of ease prices more? Obviously, the pandemic has had an impact on housing prices, at least temporarily, if not longer. But what's your thoughts generally on housing development and whether a lot more housing should be built in the city?
We need to build housing, but the thing is, we have 135 empty apartments in New York City. I mean, just that number is mind-boggling. And we're talking about problems. So first of all, let's get the inventory of those 135,000 units, put those 135,000 units on the market. The second part is we need to have universal rent control and basically some sort of regulation over what it is to be a landlord. We have regulation for everything, so I don't see why we shouldn't have regulation to be a landlord.
You want to expand rent regulation to all apartments?
Yes, absolutely. We need to, and this should include how we build new stock, because we need to, the whole thing is we cannot have this mixed market where you have something on market and something regulated. No, it's either one or the other.
Last few quick questions, yes or no questions. Do you think the city's plan to close Rikers Island and build new jails should continue? Yes or no?
We shouldn't close Riker, but we shouldn't be building new jail all over the place. We need to divest. So yes and no.
Okay. And lastly, do you believe in developing housing on NYCHA land, sometimes referred to as infill development of NYCHA land?
Absolutely not. Actually, we should be destroying some of those buildings and rebuilding neighborhood that look like inclusive to the neighborhood instead of those ugly tower that they have built, that Moses built a long time ago.
Right. Okay. All right. We're going to leave it there. Tio Chino is a Democratic candidate for New York City Public Advocate. It was good to get a sense of your platform and where you stand on a few of these issues. Obviously, many more we didn't get to, but it'll be an interesting campaign season. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. And thank you for watching Decision NYC with Ben Max. Key decisions for New York City voters are coming up in June and the fall. There's a lot on the line for all of us and the future of New York City. I hope this conversation was helpful to you. I'm Ben Max. See you next time.